Thanks so much for joining us today to talk about Tango and what it's like to work on the platform and why our developers find it important to build on the platform. So just as a little background, so I'm Kelly Santiago. I co-founded an independent game development studio years ago called That Game Company. Then I worked at the Android, Android-based console Ouya. Little woo, mini woo, working with developers. And now I'm super excited to be working with even more pioneering developers on our new projects under the Google VR banner. So Project Tango is a platform that gives developers the abilities to build apps that understand space and motions. Over the past 2.5 years, we've had over 6,000 developers building applications ranging from interactive games that you may have checked out in the sandbox, and if you haven't, you should totally check them out, to tools to help architects. We are really fortunate to have with us today a group of Project Tango developers building very different apps. So with that, I'm actually going to let them, because it is I.O., and I feel like you're here to hear from developers and people working on the platform. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what brought them to Tango and what they're working on.
Great. I'm Joel. I'm Joel Pennington, and I work at Autodesk. And my job is to take technology from the film, game, and TV industry and bring it to the hands of folks in the other industries that Autodesk creates software for. And that manifests itself in visualization tools today for architects, engineers, construction professionals, folks that build anything. It's part of our future of making things movement. And what we're doing today with the Tango tablet is we're giving the amazing film production tools that you get if you're creating Avatar in the form factor of a tablet that everyone gets and understands, and deliver it to an architect to let him or her explain their design to their clients in a way that was never possible before.
All right. I'm Robin Hunneke. I'm the co-founder of Funomena. Here in San Francisco. I actually worked at That Game Company with Kelly on a game called Journey. And then afterwards, I came back up to the Bay Area because I love it here and founded this company. And my background is in artificial intelligence and robotics. I worked on The Sims and some other simulation-based games before moving into sort of what we call deep games or emotionally based games, of which Journey is an example. And I'm really interested in the intersection between new technologies and game development. And so Tango is one of the many projects that we work on at Funomena that push our boundaries in terms of understanding, bleeding edge technologies, things that are new ways of approaching the space of play. And specifically what I liked about Tango is the ability to build a world. The thing that we work on is called World, W-O-O-R-L-D, and it is in the sandbox area, with other people by passing this viewport around and seeing the world from a different perspective. And so the best thing about it is that it lets me work with my designer, Keita Takahashi. He's most famous for developing Katamari Damacy, and letting his irreverent understanding of the world become real through this lens. So it's been a really fantastic experience.
Cool. I'm Kyle, and I don't have a cool intro song, but I work on that.
That's not true.
No, not true. I'm Kyle Nell, and I'm the executive director of the Lowe's Innovation Labs. And Lowe's Home Improvement is a big Fortune 50 North American home improvement company. And so our group is we build stuff you wouldn't expect a Lowe's to build with people you wouldn't expect us to build it with, and I think this is a great example of that. And we've done a lot of other things too. But this one in particular is a persistent problem, a customer problem. Has anyone done a home remodel? I think a lot of sad nods. It's really hard, and one of the biggest problems is not the inability to buy the thing that you want. It's really the visualization and trying to understand how a lot of different things could happen in your space, and then communicate that with the other person that's making that decision with you, your significant other or whoever. And that inability to get that out of your head or to understand what it would look like just stops people from doing projects. And that really, really hampers what we're trying to help people do, which is improve their homes and help people live where they live. So Tango is uniquely situated and suited to be able to meet that need. And we're really, really excited to be part of this group.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jesse Schell. Let's see, formerly I was the creative director of the Disney Virtual Reality Studio back in the 90s. For the past dozen years or so, I've been teaching at Carnegie Mellon and running a place called Schell Games out of Pittsburgh, which is a team of about 100 game developers doing all kinds of things. We were first drawn to Tango because part of what we do are interactive theme park installations, interactive museum exhibits. We love this idea of being able to mix digital with space. And while that was initially what we were completely focused on, we quickly found that, like, wow, there are a lot of just super fun game things you can do with it, because we're always on the lookout for things that are magical, and we were really pleased at how magical the Tango technology can be.
Cool. So, Robin,
Yes.
I was hoping you could kick it off with talking about what's been a surprising challenge for you, and then maybe that'll inspire some of the other panelists to weigh in as well.
Sure. So the thing that I'm really interested in right now is that VR and AR technologies really involve two things. They involve the body and our perception of reality. And like, you can think of those things as the same thing, but there's the physical embodiment of motion and interactivity that you do when you're in a VR or an AR space. And then there's also the way that your body interprets signals that are coming into it to turn it into reality. And so one of the biggest challenges for me personally with augmented reality is that unlike an experience where you're cutting out all of the world, you have to really work alongside the world. And if you're a designery type person like me, you are particular about how things look and feel. And so building something that has an aesthetic, like a feeling, but also having it be able to work in any kind of environment with any number of ugly pieces of furniture, random detritus on the table, that sort of stuff. For me, it just kind of like gnaws at my designery sensibilities. And so one of the things that we found challenging when we first started working with Tango was, how do we build like a consistent aesthetic experience that looks cool and feels like it came from Keita's imagination, for example, because he has a very classic and interesting style. Like, his work is in the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Like, he's a well-known designer. How do we take that design aesthetic and put it out into spaces that could maybe be completely cluttered or totally empty? And what was really interesting is that getting past that challenge, we were able to sort of think about the fact that we don't need to design everything. What we really need to do is design the space just in front of you, the attentional activity that you're interested in, give you a sound cue, draw your attention somewhere else. And so it started to give us a different surface to design on. We started thinking a lot more about the body and the attention of the body as we interacted with the space. So it was a challenge, but it was also eye-opening, and I think, honestly, it has made us all better developers at Funomena.
How about Joel?
Well, when we take a look at the way that directors today create films in the virtual production world, we've solved many of the problems around interacting with a world that doesn't physically exist. Yeah. And the challenge for us was taking that, which is $1 million equipment, hundreds of people working in the background, and putting that onto the Tango tablet and making it work for an architect who doesn't know how to make a film, doesn't know about film production technologies, but is able to communicate the design idea. And when we worked with the folks at Tango, we were able to enlist a number of charter architects that let us develop this in concert and create a research platform at Autodesk that allows us to fully visualize and experiment with this new way of interacting with your designs.
So what I think would be really interesting is to talk about, you've all been working with this in the field now for a bit, and probably have some learnings from focus testing and user testing that you've been doing. Like, what are some surprising things? Maybe Kyle, you can start us off.
So my background's in applied neuroscience. So there's two sides of neuroscience. There's the physician side, and then there's the hardware, software nerds. You probably can fit which one I was in. So anyways, one of the things we built early on at Lowe, surprisingly, was an applied neuroscience company. So we actually put high-res EEG headsets on people and eye-tracking goggles, and we tested. And Tango, our application of Tango, is not our first venture into virtual and augmented reality. We've done a number of things in that platform we call the Hollow Room. So we've been testing different iterations, including Cardboard and others, using applied neuroscience, which is far better, as a social scientist, a far better thing than asking somebody what they thought of it only. Or did you see the button on the left, right? Because then you're biasing the response. And so we could see very quickly what was working and not working. But most interestingly, the biggest measure, one of the big measures we test for is this thing called cognitive load, which is how much your brain is having to work. Now, there's a sweet spot. You don't want it to be underwhelming, where you're not engaged. Like, you ever drove to work and you get out of your car and you're like, I don't even remember driving. That's really low cognitive load, and it concerns me. But we've all done it, right? And then there's too much, and that is bad too. But you want to hit that sweet spot, which is very, very hard. And as we did all this testing, we saw that Tango just more intuitively hit that sweet spot on a number of measures. Back to what she was saying too about how you have to have this intuitive form factor, and this is a far more intuitive form factor for right now. So we're really excited about that. But there's still so many different ways to iterate and to serve up content and the experience with the functionality. And that's back to the question about challenge. It's been interesting for us to take, okay, well, we think this is the answer based on what we just saw, and we put that in, and then it creates a whole bunch of other potential challenges. But it's just been really great to work with the Google team and use the neuroscience and then put it in the field very quickly in front of real, actual people to see how they respond to it. It's been great.
Yeah, Jesse, what about with your work? You've kind of done a variety of projects. So what have you been learning through watching people play?
Yeah, I guess what we're finding is that the shift to kind of making Tango experiences is almost as big a shift as when we went from mouse-based and gamepad-based gameplay to touch-based gameplay. Because when we went to touch, we had to reinvent UI. We had to invent this whole new language of the way you interact with things. And what was intuitive was really different. And the key, what we're finding, the same key that we found back with touch games is the same key now, which is watch what children do. Because children are way smarter than the rest of us, because we've all been trained up on all kinds of broken nonsense in our brains, right? When you give adults Tango, what we find is we'll be doing games and we're trying to show them how to play, and adults sometimes are like, well, how do I move? I'm like, well, you move. You just move. Well, how do I zoom in? Where's the zoom button? I'm like, you zoom in. It's like right there in front of you. Get closer to it. But you never have to tell this to children. Yeah. And we even have to kind of use this logic on ourselves. We had a thing where we wanted to, we're making this one game where you can set up big rows of dominos all over the place, and then you can knock them all down, which is super fun because you can do it very fast, and you don't have to clean them up. It's really nice. You just hit a button, and doop, they stand up again, and you can change it around. And we wanted to be able to move the whole set that we'd made. And I was like, yeah, let's put in little buttons that like, boop, 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 move it to the left and right. And the developers are like, yeah, no, stupid. You just move them all to the left and right. Just like pick them up and, oh yeah, I can do that. So it's sort of learning these sort of new, more intuitive powers. It's almost like more like unlearning is sort of what you have to do in order to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Would you recommend a certain breadth of audience when you're conducting a focus test or user tests, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you
have all ages, or
if you want to sell to a lot of people, sure.
No one wants that. No.
Yeah.
But you find kids give sort of most meaningful feedback on.
I find they're best at knowing they're best at showing you intuition.
Yeah.
Natural human intuition, that is. You still need to test with adults because you've got to learn all of the unintuitive behavior that they've learned and figure out how you're going to unravel that and get them back to something natural. But it can be very helpful to test with kids for that reason.
It's also really great to test with people that are not necessarily in the realm of gamer, or like, like experienced super user like myself. Because, we tend to develop things for ourselves. We make them tweakers so that we can be very precise. We want to add all this detail. And if you just put someone someone who's never even tried a sort of a virtual reality or an augmented reality technology into the experience, you almost always get questions that reflect back to your own ignorance, your own written-in rules about how people will behave. I think it's very important to test with everyone and their partner and their parents. Right. Try to get really outside the envelope.
And for many of my clients and customers, they're architects. These are people who have been architects or engineers for decades. Yeah. So they are not gamers. They take the Tango tablet that we give them. And the first challenge is actually getting their design onto the tablet. So we had to build a pipeline to go from our design software to our game engine very quickly and efficiently using a whole bunch of cool stuff on the cloud. Once we get to their design on the tablet, the first thing they do is, oh, this is neat. I'm like, you can move. Oh, oh. And then once they start exploring, they start to show their coworkers how it functions. And then you'll never get the tablet back.
Yeah. I think for us, too, as we've done a lot of this testing, we're testing like regular, normal, folks that have never even heard of Tango or don't follow any of this stuff or even know what virtual reality is really. And giving it to somebody, there's one woman in particular, we gave her the, explain what virtual reality was and what do you think about virtual? She's like, virtual what? And then at the end, we didn't explain anything else other than we just gave it to her and told her to explore with it. And then she repeated back everything that we were trying to convey. Had we just written up like a concept test and explained all the keywords. And so that intuitive piece is really, really important. I think that's what sets us apart. Yeah. And the other thing, too, is the intuitive bit, even though the form factor is very intuitive, there's still a lot of challenges back to the thing. So for us, like, how do you serve up like 300 toilets that look pretty much the same? In a virtual environment without overwhelming people. I mean, these are like the kind of challenges that we hit all the time to overcome some of the learned behavior and make it more intuitive.
Sort of building on that, bringing in different audiences, and you guys all come from different backgrounds. I'm sort of wondering for this audience of current and hopefully future Tango developers, what are some resources that you found helpful to bring into your work in augmented reality and on Tango? Either a specific tool or philosophy or teaching.
I actually spend a lot of time looking at the works of Disney and thinking about the ways in which park design and experience design for physical space really influences the development of games and playable spaces and activities, specifically attentional design. So just really basic concepts like having a weenie, so putting something in the space that will draw a person forward. Like the number one challenge with Tango devices is to get people to actually move while holding it. So you got to put something in front of them that's a little bit cute and a little bit interesting and a little bit sparkly with a little glitter, and then they'll walk to it, right? Like you need to bring them forward. And if you make it sound a little bit louder,
a lot of nodding happening.
Yeah, it really it feels nice. And so, if you want to think about physical space and physical design, you need to really think about like what draws a person's attention and how much motion should things have. And then, of course, the opposite of that, which is how do you avoid cluttering the space? How do you keep it simple? These are things that you can use whether you're working on something like an immersive 3D game like Journey, or Watam or Luna that we're building, like Luna's a VR title that we're developing now, or something like World, where it's a very sparse set of interactions, but they just immediately spice up the space because they bring that magical feeling into it. So that's something that I think is really important.
On the technical side of things, the developers and I were very impressed with how quickly we were able to get ramped up simply through access to the APIs and the docs.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good job.
For us, we do all of the things the same. We don't do virtual reality or augmented reality for VR AR sake. We just think it's the best way to solve like human problems and human needs that people have been asking for forever. We call them common cold problems. It's like you can put a man on the moon, but you can't, So so we think that VR and AR solves that purpose, and we use this thing where we actually hire professional science fiction writers to envision the probable convergence of tech and trends. So we started doing this about 4 years ago, and if you look at the original stories, it looks a lot like Tango. This is before I would say the VR emergence really showed up. And so for us, it helping to focus on what the solution is rather than the technical capabilities that we have right now. And that changes, I've seen it, the direction in which the development takes. Because you don't take the most, I don't know, maybe not the easiest is not the best word, but the one with the least resistance path. You take the solution-focused path. And they sometimes converge, but not always. And that's really been helpful for us.
One thing we've done a lot is it's so easy when you're used to developing apps and software to just be thinking about the digital world. But when you get into this realm of spatial design, you need to look at real world things. How is a model train set designed and why? How are Legos designed and why? How big should things be? How small should things be? And you need to think about things like, am I designing an experience that's about interacting with things on the floor, on a table, while I'm standing, while I'm moving around the house? Like what exactly, you're just having to think about that spatial context and then taking design inspiration. I mean, we were taking a lot of design inspiration from toys and play sets and their designs as opposed to from video game space.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, to follow up on that, our office is filled with clay, sand, sculpting sand. We have a lot of Playmobil toys and also a lot of Plan toys. Plan toys are really great. And just in terms of form factor, one of my favorite ones is it's just a simple base with long planks coming out of it that looks like a tree, and then it has a set of ladybugs, and the tree has little spots on it of different colors, and you can put the ladybugs on the colors using a colored dye. So it's a way of teaching kids how to match the colors, but it's also a balancing game, because the more ladybugs you place on the tree branches, the more wobbly they get. So we are really interested specifically in toys that are physical, that have some sort of a learning component. So early age development toys are, I think, really good for where everyone's audience is going to be in these technologies. That's just something actually that Genova used to say, that when you put someone into a new environment, their response to that environment is going to be just like a baby, right? They're going to poke at stuff, and they're going to try to see what it does and learn what its physics and its behaviors are. So being in the mindset that you're creating these learning toys as opposed to experiences necessarily or applications is really helpful, and being able to engage the playful qualities of people of all ages is, I think, essential for that design.
Yeah, well, as far as understanding space, Joel, it seems like your clients, architects, have a really rich history in that. Like, how are they responding to this new technology?
Oh, well, it's transformative. If we go back a little bit, blueprints were the best that an architect could do to visualize what this new space, this new city, if you're a civil engineer, would look like, would it feel like to the potential clients. And that's a really terrible way to communicate your design intent. Full stop. So then we moved to building 3D models of little cities and buildings. And it looked cool. It looked like Lego. But it didn't allow the stakeholders, the folks that are at the town hall meetings, to fully understand, how is this really going to impact my life? It's not until today where we have access to immersive technologies like game engines and so forth that allow you to really stick your client into that world and let them understand what it's like at a one-to-one scale. Or should I want to, let me fly over to the other end of the city and experience what this construction project will do to my daily commute. We can simulate all of that, we can visualize all of that, and give that person the exact true-to-life scenario that they will see when it's physically constructed. And the architects today are using this not just for those really important pitch projects where they really got to win that new job. They're actually using it in daily design reviews internally. So they're not just showing it to their clients, they're using it for their own design purposes. Because design software is amazing, but it is required to be so precise and have so much information in it, that is like an anchor pulling it down. It doesn't allow it to be live and rich in real time. And we get that with the Tango tablet.
That's awesome.
That is blowing my mind. Sorry. A moment. whenever there's a brand new space like this, I think it's a unique opportunity to kind of hit the reset button on how we've been approaching media.
Yeah.
You know, television and film, I feel like whether it's for entertainment or for education, like news programs, you can see take a lot of their cues from dramatic and fictional programming. And similarly, in the digital space, we still approach everything with the divide of here are apps and here are games. And I'm wondering if you see ways in which we could be as like developing or harvesting this new developer ecosystem of like cross-pollinating, or what are the opportunities there?
If I may, just very briefly, absolutely. The design requirements to build a city, build a building, make a thing that you then want to get funded via Kickstarter require expertise and design knowledge. But if you want to communicate your idea, you have to do that using new technology, and game engines are the way to do that. And I will pass on. I didn't want to take two answers, but I had to.
I totally agree that it's very important to sort of think about experience design and applications, creativity, sharing, the ways in which we are all very social, as well as the designed experience. And so I think for us, one of the initial reactions to the idea of using a Tango device was, well, you know, it's going to be hard. Like I said, it won't look that good. The world would be messy. But when we started developing with it, almost instantaneously, we were passing the device around, talking about the experience that we were engaged in, and then thinking about, oh, I would love to place this little interactive snowman on your head and take a photo of it and then share it with my mom. You know, that would be a funny photo. And like the idea of sort of instantly becoming aware of how social the experience was. And then also, because it's a small form factor, unlike a game engine, like we normally develop game engines for, in-game engines like Unity for PlayStation 3 and for like high-end PC VR. So our experience has been being tethered by that technology. With Tango, we were able to experiment on a daily basis and immediately give the application to other people in the office. It was not uncommon for, even during a meeting, for people to just get up and start trying stuff and walking around. It was such a rapid iteration cycle. So for us, moving towards applications freed up our minds as developers and really gave us permission to try and experiment in ways that we maybe wouldn't have done if we were working like in a big 3D space in an engine with a high-end, you know, visualization technology. So I think it goes both ways. You know, the lower resolution allowed us to free ourselves from expectations, which limited our designs. And it's really, honestly, I said this before, but I'll say it again. It was the most pleasant development site, like pipeline experience that I've had so far. It was so fast and so easy compared to some of the clunkier stuff that we've been working on.
Cool. Jesse, I know you've been thinking a lot about, as you all have, but you in particular have been vocal as well on sort of the future of all this technology. What are you excited to see in the future of Tango and augmented reality?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of talk about augmented reality right now, and there's not a lot of augmented reality in the world. It's mostly just talk about something that no one knows what it is.
That's true.
And we could all hang out and wait for it, you know, for a glasses-sized, perfect matrix augmented reality to show up, and maybe one day it will. But in the meantime, what's excited me is working with Tango, we're already learning the alphabet of augmented reality. We're learning the best practices because it's a system that's here and it works today. And that this year you're going to be able to make apps for customers with. And so that's one of the things I love. And oh, and back to your question about this app-game divide. The way I think about that is apps are generally about creating something useful. That's generally what apps are for. So here, go create something useful. And games are usually about doing something fun. And that middle space is about creating something fun, I think. And that's why Minecraft is so successful. It's not a game. It's an app that's about creating something fun. And Tango is one of these things that just really allows you to create a lot of things in that middle place.
Cool. Kyle, do you have any thoughts about future, as you have also a coordinator on?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of pieces there. So, the business side of things. Obviously, there's a tremendous opportunity to be able to like figure out how you can take these gaming learnings of like what works in games and then to be able to apply it in this new space that's not quite an app, but is something wholly different. And I like what you were saying too earlier about how this is a platform change, much in the same way as some of the other platforms changed in the past. And coming at it from that direction, you start to think about it differently, hopefully. But there's also, beyond just the development piece and thinking about it, there's also an infrastructure thing that has to change as well. Like on our side, there's all kinds of things we have to do, like the asset creation process. Like how do you have beautiful 3D assets that work in different environments and work very well over different kinds of networks? And then how do you serve that up in a meaningful way without overwhelming people? Like all of these things we're beginning to have to figure out now, to your point, because it's actually starting to arrive. And from what I've seen in the actual science of the neuroscience stuff, if you don't think about it intentionally and think about it structurally in those different ways, beyond what the person playing the thing actually uses, it'll just be a mess. Yeah. And my worry is that if we don't think about those things as a group and solve some of those big challenges, then the architecture on which we continue to develop will just be messier and messier.
Yeah, there is a real risk for lock-in, I think, right now. And as developers, it's all of our jobs to think about what we can do to really reverse or unlearn, as Jesse was saying, bad lessons or just like locked-in assumptions about how people operate and what they want. People respond to what you give them, and you get what you give. As a designer or as a developer, you have to be always giving more and thinking about things at a much broader level than what's just easy. And I think one of the best things about being able to rapidly iterate on technologies like this is that you can try a lot of things quickly, you can put them out there, you can see how people respond to them, and it's a really rich environment for questioning our own intuitions. But it really is our responsibility to make sure that the next 100 years or 300 years of advances in terms of us being able to put ourselves into reality in different ways and to absorb reality through different lenses and filters, that we're really thinking about this from perspective of what is human in terms of what doesn't stress the body on a regular basis, what doesn't stress the cognitive on a regular basis, how do we engage with one another in safe ways, and how do we allow our imaginations to be as broad and as open as they can be, and not just think of everything as a tight little package, a single absorption, therefore we want to streamline it right into your brain, but really give people the opportunity to be more expansive as humans. This is something that we will be designing right now, and so stop thinking about the mouse and the keyboard, stop thinking about standard ways of input, lists, all this other stuff, the clickable, scrollable UI. There are so many other ways to do things in these spaces, and it's really actually in all of your hands. It's a very important mission, I think.
When we look at all of this cool new hardware that's coming out that enables augmented reality and virtual reality experiences, I firmly believe it will all fall flat unless there's content to support it.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And we're content creators, but it is really tough to make compelling content today. At Autodesk, it is no secret that we have most of the software folks use to make CG content today. We also have our game engine Stingray, and right now we've got a very strong coupling between that software and the engine, and that lets us test and iterate very quickly with architects and game designers and so forth that want to be able to take their assets that they've created in their traditional packages and get them into that interactive experience quickly to elicit feedback from charter users, customers, gamers, and so forth.
Kyle, working with a brand like Lowe's, I would imagine, would have additional complexities as far as how much you're able to iterate or rapidly iterate. I don't know, is that true? Or what's that process like for you and your team?
Not many people know that Lowe started as an augmented reality company in the 40s. We've just been waiting a long time.
Way ahead of their time.
We decided selling home improvement supplies was a good way to build capital. Anyway.
I mean, there's a lot of responsibility to physical spaces.
Yeah, exactly.
And people of all kinds.
So, without waxing too philosophical, Lowe's mission is to help people love where they live. And so the way that we manifest that right now is through building these stores all over North America. But clearly that ambition expands into the digital realm as well. And so when that's your goal, the organization hopefully will modify itself in order to help achieve whatever then is kind of what opportunities kind of arise when you're on this exponential path, especially on AR and VR. And so for us, when we started down this a few years ago doing different platforms, we did that with the intention of making sure that the organization was malleable enough so when we didn't know it was going to be called Tango or who was going to do it, but when it arrived, we would be ready-ish for it. And ish is the key thing. And I think if you talk to any large organization on the planet, not just a retailer, not just a traditional kind of business thing, they're all trying to understand how to engage people in a more meaningful way. And what more meaningful way than the most intuitive way, which right now I think is clearly Tango. I mean, and so once again, like for us, it's about showing what the promise could be and the possibility could be, and then trying to, I don't know if beat up is the right word, but it's kind of what I do, is to beat up the organization so that they will kind of understand it and then jump on. But I will say too that Lowe's has gotten behind this in a big way because they see the potential of it.
Kyle, tell them your job title.
I'm the executive director of Lowe's Innovation Labs and the vice president of disruptive innovation. So we were joking around at breakfast this morning that when people come and they're like, Kyle's such a jerk. He made me do this. I'm like, hey, see, I'm winning.
That's my job.
Tenderizing.
Success. Yeah.
For the year. I feel like that kind of touches on what Jesse was mentioning as far as maybe having this broad view that exists outside of technology, but then you're ready for the technology as it manifests, which we always know is like not the utopia. No. It's like somewhere in the middle. And then just be ready for that and see what you can do. It's cool. What tips do you have for first-time Tango developer?
I got a lot.
Oh, good.
So I'd say the big thing is to keep it simple. Yeah. You're going to have to find your way in terms of what works. You're going to have a lot of big, dreamy ideas about all the wonderful things that are going to work, and not everything is going to work yet. It's a platform that has its strengths and has its weaknesses. If you go in kind of, and I think we did this initially, we started kind of playing around with it, my gosh, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years ago, something like that. And we had like this big dream of exactly how it was going to work. And when it didn't work exactly that way, we were like, rah, we hate this. And then a little later, we're like, well, maybe we should just do what it's good at. And we started kind of focusing on that. And then we started making all this path forward, you know. So I think going in with an open mind and looking for what it's good at, and you'll find things like we ended up kind of finding like, oh my God, it's really good at playing Jenga, and this just hadn't occurred to anybody, and it was just because we started thinking like, all right, where is this strong and what can it do?
Yeah, I would say also just really being open to trying the weirdest and most bizarre idea that you have. Keita is incredibly irreverent when it comes to reality. He just doesn't like the fact that there's gravity and that we have limitations in physical bodies and that we can't just appear to each other as giant teddy bears or, you know, animating carrots or whatever. Like, he wants the world to be a really magical place in ways that is sometimes very frustrating to him. So his first experience with Tango was to immediately ask, can we hang things on the ceiling? Can I make a cloud that will rain and then little flowers will sprout? Like, how can I engage in this reality in a way that totally questions what we expect? And so to give yourself permission to just have the strange idea and put it in, because it is so easy, it is so fast. Like, it was so possible for us to add features and get them into the pipeline and testable within the same day of having a meeting. It would be in the device. And so don't lock yourself into this pattern of thinking that you have to flow everything out. Really go with what the device is good with, but specifically ask yourself, why not? You know, as opposed to sort of always trying to detail exactly why.
And then give it to people and watch them play with it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the most amazing reaction, because they start small, and then once they realize what they can do, you'll never get the tablet back. You're just going to have to go buy another one.
It's true. It's true. We're always having people jealous of people interacting with the Tango device at work. Like, people kind of cluster around and try to touch it. They want to see.
So, and then to add on to that, it's been really helpful for us after you hand somebody, a normal person who doesn't do this all the time, and have them experience it, have them explain it to somebody else sitting right next to them about how they would talk about it. Like, there's so many different things that came out of that. Like, oh my gosh, that's really what you got out of that? And like, that's really what you wanted? And it just takes you in different directions.
Yeah, and you were talking earlier, Robin, before the panel too, about designing around the constraints, and Jesse was kind of touching on this too. Like, there's strengths and there are weaknesses, and so when you find out maybe that original idea doesn't quite work, it's sort of like, okay, well, how can I lean into what the strengths of the platform are?
Yeah, I think that we actually felt comfortable writing our own, like rolling our own when it came to certain aspects of the system. We especially wanted people to be able to set up a little play area and then walk away from it and come back and have it persist. So we were able to use features of the device to make that happen. And then in places where we were struggling a little bit, we just wrote software that took care of that problem from a different perspective. So we would ask ourselves, what is this really about? So for example, like being able to leave a play set and then come back to it is really about matching the picture in your mind to what you built. So we built something where you take a picture with it, and then later you just line up the picture and it's there again. And people will do a lot. They will give you a lot in order to have that fun experience. They haven't learned that the technology is supposed to solve all of our problems. When we first started working with Tango developers, Nikolai and some of the other people that we were working with in the organization gave us this big, long list of all these things that we would have to educate users to do. And I said, do you want me to write you a use case tutorial, or do you want a game design, right? Because I can design around like 30 to 70% of these things, depending on how creative the people are on the project. Let's not think about all the limitations of the technology. Let's think about the couple of things it does well and what we can get people to give us for free. And so that's the other thing that you can really do, I think, with something this simple, is you can get a lot for free. People are not expecting the world to be given to them on a platter, and when they, honestly, in our user testing on Google Campus, when people experience it, they're blown away. They're literally like, this is so cool. It does so much cool stuff. I had no idea. And in your mind as a developer, you're imagining, the holodeck. So, you're like, it's not the holodeck. Like, this is not Data, doing like a Sherlock Holmes thing in real time. Your limitations are so much greater than the user. The everyday person who picks up a Tango will literally be blown away. So don't limit yourself in that way.
So we just have a few minutes left. I'm wondering if real quickly we can put back the slide with the speaker's information on it, and you can see their Twitter accounts. Let's give a hand for all of our awesome panelists and developers. Thank you for sharing your lessons learned and for coming out here.